Hi, this is Steve Lee, Extension Lead Scientist and Assistant Professor of Auburn University. I cover weed management mainly in cotton and peanut, and also work in specialty crop and work on dicamba, off-target movement quite a bit these days. I appreciate the invitation from Florida Extension to record this video regarding weed control in peanut. And I will go through a few common problems with weed control in peanut, and also give y'all an update of our research in this area. All right, let's take a look at the first slides. These are the pictures that I took in my farm visits in the fall of 2020. As you can see, it's really not that hard to find a very weedy peanut field. I remember I started to collect weeds every fall since 2015. That's the first year I was hired by Auburn. Back then, it was not hard at all to find big old pigweeds in almost, every single cotton peanut field back then. It was like everywhere, but in cotton, things start to get a whole lot better because we have the extend flag system and the enlist system, so people have more options to spray those pigweed. I mean, particularly Palmer amaranth, compared to what we used to have, which is mainly the Roundup Ready system. However, in peanut, it's not a GMO. We don't have those fancy dicamba 240 options, and a lot of those peanut fields are still fully ate up by pigweed, and the grasses are a common issue in those peanut fields just because you don't have the Roundup option either. So I think there are plenty room for growers to improve in peanut weed control. However, the challenges are still there because it's not a GMO crop and we don't have many herbicide options in general. So let's talk about some of the typical issues that I have seen, which led to very weedy peanut fields before harvest. First, I think spray timing was off for many growers. Now, this is a hard problem to get around because when you farm several thousand acres in a 50-mile radius, or maybe in several different counties, sometimes it's just hard to get back to the first field where you plant it first and control the weeds in a timely manner. But still, we need to try to spray weeds on time. If we mean spray weeds when they're below 3 to 4 inches, we have to spray them when they are below 3 to 4 inches. If you spray sickle pod or palmer or goosegrass when they're over a foot tall, the efficacy can never be comparable to when you spray them when they are below 3 to 4 inches. So timing is always very important. And also, I think many fields ate up by grasses, like goosegrass, crabgrass, Texas panicum. That's probably and the crowfoot grass. That's the 4 grasses that I have seen the most in peanut field before harvest. Those are usually caused by incorrect timing, which is usually because spray too late, and also a lot of growers don't typically use a residual herbicide with the post-emergence material over the top. Using one shot of Dew Magnum, Warrant, or Zedral Outlook, one of those 4 chlorcidamide herbicide with your post-emergent herbicide around 30 to 40 days after planting, that will make a huge difference in grass control later on. Don't overspray your Salamax or Fusilade too many times. First, you are creating a resistant issue down the road. Second, those products are very expensive, So we don't want to already rely on those post-emergent herbicide. The best way to control palmer or goosegrass or any type of those annual grass weeds is to tackle them before they even germinate. You don't want them to germinate or come out from the ground, all right? So if you think the right way is to spray them every time you see them, you will never win that game because they constantly germinate throughout your crop. We have lots of dry land in South Alabama and the Florida Panhandle area. So whenever you spray your pre-emergent herbicides behind a planter and it doesn't rain for 2-3 weeks after you plant, obviously that always causing some issue. So lack of rain can be a problem that led to some of the weed escapes, particularly the weed escapes happen early on in the crop. But I also have seen a couple of fields where growers spray a pre, didn't get rain for 2-3 weeks, and finally after they got a rain, about 20-25 days later, that was a pretty dry period before they got rain, and they still saw weed control in those areas where they spray a pre-emergence treatment. So which means your pre's will not fully degraded or dissipated during that dry period of time, whether it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks. You are still getting some benefit even though you don't get rain to activate those chemicals for extended period of time. I'm not saying you're getting 100% of your efficacy of your chemicals, but even 50 or 60% of the chemical remaining in the soil still help you suppress pigweed, palmer, all the other weeds that you have in the field. Another problem I have seen is growers tend to avoid using burn herbicides such as gramoxone or cobra or aim or blazer because they are concerned with leaf burn. That is okay if you don't have palmer, but if your peanut field is infested with palmer amaranth, palmer pigweed, you will have no choice but using some burn herbicide. It is going to burn your peanut, but usually the burn is a cosmetic issue. It's not going to translate into yield loss, and you will still have a fairly good yield potential with your peanut as long as you don't burn your crop in a short period of time repeatedly. That's not something good to do. Also, I have seen a few cases or a few fields having lots of weeds because the environmental conditions were not great. For instance, you spray a post-emergence material in very hot, very dry conditions. Usually the weeds will be very tough and you cannot get a very good control under those extreme situations. And sometimes when people spray gramoxone in a very cloudy day or say right before the rain gets to that field and they may not get the full 4 hours rain-free period. Some of the gramoxone definitely got washed off from the leaf before they have a chance to get into the plants. So usually in that situation, you're not going to get very good weed control. So always scout your field after you spray a post-emergence material. If you don't see much control from the treatment you sprayed, it always means something had happened. It's either because you spray in a very cloudy day and those herbicides you spray like Cobra or Blazer or Gramoxone really need the sunshine to work, or if you may have a pop-up thunderstorm and washed off most of the materials on the leaf before they got a chance to get into the weed, or inside the weed, inside the cells. So always check your field and make sure the post-emergent treatment you spray are actually doing the work. If you don't observe much symptom on the weeds or on the crop after 7 days, I always recommend people spray the post-emergence treatments again, so you don't have a lot of escapes. Then sometimes when it rains too much, we're going to have some seedling stunting issue. Seedling stunting issue is hard to avoid when it just rains too much or you have intensive rain within a shorter period of time after you plant your crop. Most likely, if you use some hot herbicide like full rate, like full 3-ounce rate of batter with full rate of dual magnum together in a tank mix, and then after you use that treatment, it rains too much, say it rains 3 inches within the next 7 days after you plant your crop, you're almost guaranteed to have some problem with stand stunting or seedling stunting. I'm not saying that you will have a elimination of the stand, like nothing come up. It won't be that bad, but it's very likely that after your peanut crack the ground, they will stay stunted for extended period of time. This could be 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, nobody knows. But until they suddenly grow out of that stunting, you will have some mental stress to deal with every time you look at those crops. Things like that happen. So particularly in the wet year, or you can foresee it's going to rain a lot after you plant, I would recommend a grower using a relatively light dose of the praise, or don't put too many things in the tank, because stunting can be a concern. All right, what's new? The good thing is we have something new on the horizon, but the bad news is we still don't have something new that can eradicate sickle pod and morning glory in peanuts. That's still not happening. Those two weeds are very, very tough for a reason. They have big seeds. And because they have big seeds, most of the soil herbicide or pre-treatments don't work very well. Again, they may not work very well. They may give you about 70% weed control, 60% weed control. And on paper, that looks like a failure, or nothing impressive. But in reality, if I show you a plot where I get 60-70% control versus a plot I didn't spray nothing, so you get 0% control, in reality, you're going to pick that 60-70% control every single time, because it looks a whole lot better than the no control plots, right? So 60-70% control in reality still has value, that's one point I want to make here. So Anthem Flex is officially on the market. That's a pre-mix of Zedra and AIM. We have done a few testing on Anthem Flex. It does provide a really good residual control of pigweed and annual grasses like goosegrass and crabgrass, those type of stuff. And because AIM in this formulation, you are also expecting some level of post-emergence control from AIM. So far I still say AIM is the best thing to remove morning glory. And a small pigweed, that's one of the best chemical to remove some of those stuff. It's also working on Hampsisbania and small tropical spiderwort as well. However, one thing we have to make grower to be aware of is the leaf burn potential from AIM, because it's a burn herbicide. So after you spray Anthem Flex, you should expect some leaf burns, just like after you spray AIM. If you don't see much leaf burn, that probably means your environmental conditions were not super great for the chemical to actually work on the weeds. Brake herbicide might be the next one to receive a label in peanut. Many of y'all have used the brake in cotton, and it provides great control of pigweed or palmer amaranth. In cotton and in peanut, we usually recommend growers to spray brake along with another residual, so you don't create a resistant problem. Two chemistry usually works better than one. So most likely, if you use a 16 ounce of brake in cotton, or in future, and when we get a label, if you use a 16 ounce rate of brake in peanut, you will need to tank mix with another residual and use that behind a planter. All right. That's another thing that may possibly get a label in future. The next slide shows you some of the pictures from our plow work, from our plows to demonstrate the Anthem Flex burn with different treatment. And then the next slide shows you the brake plots we did a couple years ago in Escambia County. That's our Brewton station a few years ago. We didn't see too much damage with brake in peanut, even at 4x rate in most of the cases. So if you look at peanut yields from Helen and Brewton in our 2018 trial, this trial was done with Georgia 06G, and looking at the treatment list, we spray brake by itself, brake with Valor, brake with Strong, brake with Warren, brake with Proud, up to 32 ounces of brake, that's 2x rate in the future label, and up to 96 ounce of wort. That's 6 pints of wort, and up to 2 pints of prowl, and up to 2x rate of strong arm, like 0.9 ounce or 6 ounce of valor with break. We have not seen peanut yield loss in those 2 locations. So that's pretty good tolerance from Georgia 06G. In our 2019 and 2020 trial, after we combined the peanut yield data, as you can see in this bar graph, we have not observed yield loss even with break herbicide at 64 ounce per acre rate. So that, that means a fairly good tolerance from 06G to break herbicide and break premix. But still, I have to tell growers that sometimes injury from break can happen. We don't see that often, but we did have observed break injury early this year in our trial at Helen and at Shorter, Alabama. We saw up to about 30% injury in some of the plot work this year. It's not something super concerning, in my opinion, because you're not going to use rate that high, even in future when the label is available. So, if you stick with the label, use around 16 ounce per acre rate, even you combine some break with valor or warrant, just like this picture shows, I still don't think you will have too much issue with peanut injury or peanut yield loss. All right, tropical spiderwort. This is one thing we have a hard time to get rid of, and I have been to a few farms with tropical spiderwort for decades, easily over 30 years, because it's a very persistent perennial weed that we got to deal with in this part of the peanut growing region. So from last 3 years research, I think strong arm is about the best thing to control tropical spiderwort in peanut. I always recommend half break, half post, half program. Use half rate of strong arm with either warrant or dual magnum behind the planter. Make sure you start clean. If you have some emerged tropical spiderwort, make sure you spray gramoxone to wipe off anything on the ground. So nothing alive on the ground when you're planting a peanut. All right, we don't want anything get a head start before peanut can germinate. And then put your parade down using that half-half program, and then save your half rate of strong arm later, around 30 to 40 days after planting. Spray the half rate with dual magnum to enhance the residual control, so that gets you a cleaner field in the latter part of your crop. Whether you use Cadre or Cobra or Blazer, those are all fine, because I don't think those post-emergence are doing too much to the spiderwort, but when you mix the half rate of strong arm with Cadre or Cobra or Blazer, it does significantly increase your tropical spiderwort control. All right. Whether you pick a burn herbicide like Cobra or Blazer or use Cadre depends on whether you got palmer or not. If you do have palmer pigweed in the peanut field, you will have to use a burn herbicide to also capture, catch the palmer in those post-emergence application. But if you got almost no palmer or no palmer at all, you can definitely still use Cadre and throw some 2,4-DB in to help pick up the sickle pod and morning glory better. All right, I'll briefly talk about some of the research update from my program. We know cover crop is a good thing, and I like to see more growers adopting cover crop on their farm. We have done cover crop research for 3-4 years, and it has shown tremendous potential to suppress weeds and also retain soil moisture in a dry year. So you can see the pictures from my cover crop plots, and they look very pretty at termination. So these pictures were taken in May 2020 when we were just about to plant peanut in this area. All right, cover crop alone is not sufficient to suppress weeds, as you can see from these pictures. After we rolled down the cereal rye and waited for about 7 days or so before we can plant peanut, because we just didn't get enough moisture, we kind of have to wait for rain, to be able to plant. But during this waiting period, I still got some sickle pod or morning glory or some broadleaf weeds that can penetrate the residue of the cereal rye in this waiting period. But if I show you the non-treated check plots, which is a bare ground, bare dirt with similar weed pressure, you can see that's making a day and night difference. In this slide, you can tell the cover crop side definitely got way less weed pressure compared to the bare ground side. Both sides got similar amount of the weed pressure. We just randomly pick one side to be planted with cover crop. One thing I want to mention is if you strip till in your cover crop area and then plant, you definitely need a herbicide. Cover crop alone is not going to work, although cover crop alone offer a good amount of suppression by itself, but we still need a soil herbicides. The reason is very simple. As you can see from this picture, weeds are growing in the furrow where you strip till, right? So you're getting more weeds germinated right next to your peanut. So that's why you still need the herbicide to suppress those weeds. And then I'm showing a few plot pictures from our Valor treatment and strong arm treatment. As you can see, Valor 3 ounce was sprayed as a pre-treatment, and we didn't spray no post-emergence material from over the top of any of these plots. Pictures were taken 49 days after planting, right? Valor with cover crop residue looked the best, followed by residue treatment by itself with no Valor. And then if you have Valor, if you spray Valor behind a planter, you can conventionally till the bare ground dirt plots. That plots is getting ate up by weeds. And where you don't spray herbicide and it's a conventional till with no cover crop residue, those peanuts were long gone. Very similar trend with strong arm. Use pre. We spray 0.45 ounce of strong arm as a pre immediately after we plant the peanut. High cover crop residue with strong arm definitely work the best, right? That's what we expect. When you combine cover crop residue with your pre-emergent herbicide, that always gets you the best in the whole world. And then looking at the fresh weight weed biomass, we have high residue treatments versus similar chemical treatments sprayed in bare ground conventional dirts. All right, almost I say in every single treatment, even with non-treated check, we're seeing less weed biomass compared to in conventional bare ground plots when we started. That tells you high residue cover crops suppress weeds by themselves, and then if you combine those with your herbicides, you're going to get even better control. Valor and strong arm perform even better in this case. All right, raw biomass stick longer than we expected, but early on within the first 21 days, we saw some degradation of the residue, but after 21 days, particularly after 35 days, the residue on the surface seems to remain fairly stable. That's the reason why cereal rye has always been the best candidate that people use to suppress weeds. And also, we did a trial to prepare us about the future PPU and ALS-resistant palmer in peanut. This is a scary weed when it evolves PPO resistant, because we're gonna lose cadre. We already lost cadre, strong arm, classic. Those are ALS chemistry. If we lose Valor, Cobra, Blazer, that's gonna be a nightmare, because we don't want to spray Gramoxone all day long to control this weed. All right, so we did a quick trial using several different planting methods. We got single row convention, twin row convention, heavy cover crop residue, single no-till, single row in the no-till, and twin row in no-till. All right, we saw peanut canopy width being the highest with heavy cover crop residue, and I think the reason is because the cover crop residue retained most of moisture, and it was a little dry after we planted, so the cover crop canopy, the peanut canopy was the widest. And then looking at the palmer counts 70 days after planting, we saw a significant reduction with pre-emergence treatment. So definitely you got to use a lot of soil herbicide pre to control palmer compared to if you don't. I hope every single grower adopt soil herbicide pre or pre-plant. That make a day and night difference. Then one interesting data with with this trial is we saw a lot more polymer with no-till compared to conventional till or compared to the heavy crop residue. The reason is fairly simple too, in my opinion. In no-till where you don't stir the soil, polymer seeds tend to sit on top of the soil surface, and that makes a flush really easy. If you stir the soil, you're going to bury some of those seeds under the dirt, and we know polymer has real small seeds. They don't germinate from a real deep soil profile. So some of the polymer seeds will not be able to germinate compared to no-till situation. The weed pressure in no-till is always going to be the worst. And then with heavy cover crop residue, they're always going to give you the best suppression because you got lots of straw on the surface. All right, looking at some plant work, we were able to control polymer with two-shot program, one pre, one post, with or without cover crop residue. But I have to say, with cover crop residue, life is a lot easier, at least for weed control. We probably have to adopt more cover crop in future when polymers start to evolve more resistance. That's just one of my predictions. All right, at the end, I'd like to acknowledge my crew, and also I want to thank the funding agency, National Peanut Board, Alabama Peanut Producer Association for providing research funding for our program. Also, I want to thank Alabama Agriculture Experimental Station and ACES Extension Agronomy team for their support in research and extension of my weed science program. If you have any questions, please contact me with my number or with my cell number or email address listed on this slide, and I'll be happy to answer any question that you have. Thank you.